What if I told you that a nation smaller than West Virginia would become the world's first digital society, survive 700 years of foreign occupation, and defeat empires through the power of song? This is Estonia's extraordinary story, one that will challenge everything you think you know about small nations and their impact on world history. 11,000 years ago, as massive glaciers retreated, the first human footprints appeared on what would become Estonian soil. But these weren't just any settlers'. Archaeological discoveries at Puli reveal a sophisticated people who thrived in one of Europe's harshest environments. Here's what will shock you. By 3500 BCE, the Finno-Ugric ancestors of modern Estonians had created something remarkable. They built over 500 hill forts, more per square kilometer than almost anywhere else in medieval Europe. These were nerve centers of a trading empire stretching from Scandinavia to Byzantium. But here's the twist. While most of Europe was embroiled in feudal warfare, ancient Estonians developed proto-democracy. Counties were led by elected elders, with major decisions made by popular assembly centuries ahead of their time. They left behind 40,000 ancient cult sites, each a window into a spiritual world we're only beginning to understand. Their priests predicted eclipses, and their epic poetry contained astronomical knowledge rivaling ancient Greek texts. Now comes the story that will leave you breathless. In 1208, Pope Innocent III declared holy war against the Baltic pagans. What happened next was one of history's most underestimated conflicts, a clash between medieval Europe's most powerful military machine and a people who refused to kneel. Meet Lembitu of Lahola, a Estonian leader who achieved something incredible. In 1217, he unified traditionally independent Estonian counties into a military confederation. For 5 years, this alliance held off the combined might of German crusading knights, Danish armies, and Russian princes. They invented guerrilla tactics that wouldn't be seen again until the American Revolution. But here's the heartbreaking truth. They were fighting with Bronze Age weapons against medieval Europe's most advanced military technology. When Lembitu fell at the Battle of St. Matthew's Day in 1217, witnesses reported that the northern lights appeared as if the sky itself mourned Estonia's last pagan king. The aftermath reveals something extraordinary about the Estonian character. Rather than disappearing under German rule, they preserved their culture underground for 700 years, one of history's longest acts of cultural resistance. Estonia became part of the Hanseatic League, with Tallinn emerging as Northern Europe's most prosperous cities. Yet beneath this medieval success story lay a people who never forgot who they were. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The devastating Livonian War 1558-1583 dropped Estonia's population by 75%. Then something miraculous happened. Sweden took control in 1561, implementing policies centuries ahead of their time. In 1632, Sweden established the University of Tartu, making Estonia one of only a handful of places in the world with higher education. But here's the game changer. Sweden began translating the Bible into Estonian. This created the first generation of literate Estonians in centuries. Suddenly, peasants who had been voiceless for 400 years could read and write. The Swedish period introduced legal rights for peasants and parish schools in every community. For the first time since the Crusades, being Estonian meant advancement, not just survival. Then disaster struck. Peter the Great's armies invaded during the Great Northern War, and what followed was apocalyptic. Plague, warfare, and famine reduced Estonia's population by 70%. The Swedish Golden Age ended in blood and fire. The Treaty of Nystad in 1721 handed Estonia to the Russian Empire, beginning what should have been the final chapter of Estonian identity. For 2 centuries, the mighty Russian Empire tried everything to absorb this small Baltic territory. They failed spectacularly. Here's why this failure is so remarkable. Russia controlled Estonia longer than any other foreign power. Yet somehow, Estonian culture didn't just survive, it exploded. The secret lies in an unexpected alliance between Estonian peasants and German Baltic nobility, who shared a common interest in resisting Russian centralization. The pivotal moment came in 1816 when serfdom was abolished in Estonia 45 years before it ended in the rest of Russia. Hundreds of thousands of Estonians were suddenly free to move, learn, and dream. Friedrich Robert Fahlmann and Friedrich Reinhold Kreutzwald collected ancient Estonian folk tales, discovering an oral tradition rivaling the Iliad and Odyssey. The national epic, Kalevipoeg, proved Estonians had always been a distinct people. But the real revolution began in 1869 with the first Estonian Song Festival. Picture 15,000 people singing in Estonian, many hearing their native language in public for the first time. This wasn't just a concert. It was a nation being reborn through music. By the 1880s, Tsar Alexander III launched brutal Russification policies. Russian became mandatory in schools. Orthodox Christianity was imposed. But oppression only made Estonian identity stronger. The 1905 revolution revealed how completely Russification had failed. Estonian peasants burned over 200 German manor houses but protected Estonian cultural institutions. They had learned to distinguish between oppressors and were ready to fight for independence. February 24, 1918, Estonia declared independence. Within 48 hours, German troops occupied Tallinn. Most observers assumed this was the end of Estonian dreams before they had truly begun. They were catastrophically wrong. What happened next defies belief. When Germany collapsed in November 1918, Estonia faced Lenin's Red Army, fresh from conquering most of the former Russian Empire. The Bolsheviks had superior numbers and equipment. Estonia had 1 million people and an army that existed mostly on paper. General Johann Lederner performed military miracles. Estonian forces stopped the Red Army just 34 kilometers from Tallinn and launched counterattacks that drove battle-hardened Bolshevik troops back across frozen rivers. The secret weapon? The entire Estonian population became an army. Farmers provided intelligence, women ran supply lines, and children carried messages. This wasn't just military resistance, it was total national mobilization in defense of a dream. The Treaty of Tartu, signed February 2, 1920, achieved something unprecedented. Soviet Russia formally recognized Estonian independence and paid war reparations. A nation of 1 million had forced the world's largest country to pay them for the privilege of leaving them alone. The interwar period unleashed Estonian creativity like never before. Land reform redistributed German estates to Estonian farmers, creating a middle class overnight. The economy boomed. Estonian literature, art, and music flourished. The University of Tartu became one of Europe's most respected institutions. But the most remarkable achievement was cultural. Estonians created a modern national identity that was uniquely their own, neither German, nor Russian, nor Scandinavian, but authentically Estonian. The song festival tradition evolved into massive celebrations involving over 30,000 performers. This wasn't just entertainment. It was democracy in action, with every voice contributing to a harmony that represented the entire nation. June 16, 1940. Soviet tanks rolled into Tallinn, ending Estonian independence. What followed was 51 years of occupation so brutal it nearly succeeded where 700 years of previous foreign rule had failed. The horror began immediately. In June 1941, over 10,000 Estonians were deported to Siberian labor camps in a single night. Families were separated forever. Children watched their parents disappear into cattle cars. The message was clear: resist and you die. Then came the Nazis. The German occupation, 1941 to 1944, brought new terrors. Estonia's small Jewish community was virtually annihilated. Thousands of Estonians were forced into German military units or sent to labor camps in Germany. Two totalitarian empires were playing tug-of-war with Estonian lives. When the Soviets returned in 1944, the real cultural genocide began. Massive Russian immigration reduced Estonians to 60% of their homeland's population. Russian became the dominant language in cities. Ancient Estonian place names were replaced with Soviet terminology. It seemed like Estonia would finally disappear. But here's what the Soviets never understood. You cannot kill a culture that lives in song. Estonian choirs continued performing, carefully choosing pieces that carried deep emotional meaning. Folk dance groups preserved ancient traditions under the guise of national folklore. The University of Tartu became a center of quiet resistance. Estonian scholars preserved their language and literature, training new generations of cultural guardians. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was crumbling, and Estonians sensed their moment had arrived. What they did next was so audacious, so unprecedented, that the world initially couldn't believe it was happening. The singing revolution began in 1987 with spontaneous performances of banned Estonian songs at official events. Audiences would suddenly join in, transforming state-sponsored gatherings into acts of resistance. Soviet officials stood helplessly as thousands of voices reclaimed the cultural space that had been forbidden for decades. September 11, 1988, 300,000 people, nearly one-third of all ethnic Estonians, gathered at the Tallinn Song Festival grounds. They sang forbidden songs, waved forbidden flags, and demanded independence. This wasn't just a concert. It was the largest act of civil disobedience in Soviet history. The genius of the singing revolution was its complete nonviolence. Soviet troops couldn't fire on people who were simply singing. The world's media couldn't ignore a revolution that looked like a music festival. Estonian leaders like Edgar Savisaar and Lennart Meri outmaneuvered Soviet bureaucrats while staying within legal boundaries that made violent suppression impossible. August 23, 1989, 2 million people formed a human chain stretching 675 kilometers across Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The Baltic Way became the most powerful image of peaceful resistance since Gandhi's Salt March. The message to Moscow was unmistakable. These nations would never voluntarily remain in the Soviet Union. The final act came during the Moscow coup attempt of August 19 to 21, 1991. While Soviet hardliners tried to seize power in Moscow, Estonian leaders declared full independence restoration. Soviet paratroopers surrounded key buildings in Tallinn, but Estonian civilians surrounded the paratroopers, singing and offering them flowers. Faced with this unprecedented response, the soldiers stood down. Here's where Estonia's story becomes almost science fiction. A nation that had been cut off from the West for 50 years decided to leapfrog directly into the digital age. The results have been nothing short of miraculous. The transformation began with a decision that seemed insane at the time. Instead of rebuilding traditional government bureaucracy, Estonia would create the world's first digital society. By 2002, every Estonian could vote online. By 2005, 95% of government services were available digitally. Estonia became the first country where being offline was more inconvenient than being online. The e-residency program launched in 2014 redefined citizenship itself. Anyone in the world can become an Estonian e-resident, access government services digitally, and start businesses online. Over 100,000 people from 170 countries have become Estonian e-residents. Estonia is literally expanding its population beyond its physical borders. The startup ecosystem exploded. Skype was invented in Estonia. WISE, formerly TransferWise, revolutionized international money transfers. Bolt challenged Uber globally. Estonia now has more startups per capita than Silicon Valley. A country with 1.3 million people has created companies worth billions. But here's the most remarkable part. Estonia has maintained its cultural identity while becoming hyper-modern. The song festival tradition continues, now incorporating digital elements. Ancient folk traditions coexist with cutting-edge technology. Estonian is thriving as a language of both poetry and programming. The 2007 cyberattacks, likely from Russia instead of crippling Estonia, made it stronger. Estonia became NATO's cybersecurity center of excellence. Estonian cybersecurity experts now protect the digital infrastructure of democracies worldwide. Estonia's history reveals something profound about human nature, the power of cultural identity to survive anything. For over 1,000 years, Estonians faced foreign domination, cultural suppression, and attempts at genocide. Each time, they found ways to adapt, resist, and ultimately thrive. Today's challenges, climate change, technological disruption, global migration seem overwhelming. Estonia's story suggests that small, agile societies with strong identities and innovative thinking can not only survive but lead. Estonia is carbon neutral by commitment, digitally advanced by design, and culturally vibrant by choice. The song festival tradition continues every 5 years, now drawing global audiences who come to witness something unique, a nation that celebrates itself, not through military parades or political speeches, but through collective harmony. In an age of division and discord, Estonia offers a different model: unity through diversity of voices, strength through cultural coherence, progress through remembering who you are. Estonia proves that geography isn't destiny, that small doesn't mean powerless, and that the future belongs not to the biggest or loudest, but to the smartest and most adaptable. From ancient hill forts to digital government, from pagan sacred groves to e-residency, Estonia has always been ahead of its time. This is why Estonia's story matters. It's not just the history of one small nation. It's a blueprint for how any people, anywhere, can preserve what matters most while embracing what comes next. In a world that often feels like it's falling apart, Estonia shows us how to hold together and how to sing while we do it.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more engaging historical content.